Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. Good to have you with us at this early pre-light hours of the morning. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Time is currently T-minus 59 minutes and counting as company SpaceX is working towards the launch of what will be its 500th Falcon 9 rocket launch to date. Also notable for the booster that is flying this 500th mission, which is tail number B1067, which will make its 29th trip to space and back. As we're beginning our coverage today, I want to thank the nearly 600 of you who are either staying up late or getting up early to be with us for this live launch opportunity. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button, sharing the stream, allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. I also want to thank our moderators in the chat who are able to help us out today. Thanks to Jeff Hansen, Astro Joe, and Callistia Lee. Appreciate you for being with us here at this middle of the night opportunity. Also to Aussie Space Girl at a much more reasonable hour down in Australia. You can help make the mods' lives that much easier in the chat just by following the rules. We ask that you converse in English so that our moderators can respond as appropriate, that you refrain from delving into overt politics and religion, that you resist the urge to use all caps when you type your messages, and that you treat each other with the kindness and respect that you yourself would like to be treated. This and every live launch opportunity is made possible in no small part thanks to our ongoing support from the channel member community we have here, both on YouTube as well as on our website, spaceflightnow.com. So for the folks on YouTube, thanks to individuals like the Rocket Girl, M. Teresa, Ryan Snyder, Rolly Nevels, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Speaking of our channel community, want to welcome in a couple new channel members. A hearty welcome aboard to Brian Bielman and Joey Schwartz, both joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level. We're glad to have you with us. Last little bit of housekeeping. If you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings-on in the realm of space or spaceflight, or would just like to offer some kind words of support this fine morning, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature to have your comment or query elevated for discussion. And not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the count, but you'll also be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that, my friends, is always greatly appreciated. For those who have been keeping tabs on Pad 40 along with us in our 24/7 live stream, Launchpad Live, you'll notice there's been quite a bit of lightning activity popping off behind the pad from our camera's perspective. Thankfully, those storms are well offshore and should not hopefully cause interference with this Falcon 9 rocket launch coming up here in just a little less than 55 minutes. SpaceX did push back the launch opportunity once by just about an hour, and we're hoping that is the last T0 shift we're going to see this morning. SpaceX, though, does have a launch window that lasts until 5:28 a.m. as long as they have not begun fueling. But Fingers crossed that they're holding to the current launch time, which is 2:28 a.m. Eastern, 06:28 UTC. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of our broadcast once again. Our photographers, Michael King, John Pisani, out here at the press site getting ready to shoot the Falcon 9 rocket as it makes its ascent from Space Launch Complex 40 there at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Adam is off on this one, but be sure to follow all of our photographers at their handles here on X. You can find John at John Pisani Photo, Michael at MD Kane Jr., Adam is at Aburn NYC. And be sure to follow Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. We're also on Blue Sky, Threads, and Facebook. Later on in the broadcast, we'll also be joined with tracking assistance by our friend Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions. For those of you who were with us earlier on in the day, really, truly yesterday now, for the launch of the MTG S1 satellite that headed out to a geosynchronous transfer orbit. We're glad to see you back here again for one more launch opportunity. If this is your first launch in the last 24 hours, we're glad to have you on board with us tonight. Well, while the weather forecast looked pretty dismal heading into that MTG S1 launch window, meteorologists look far more optimistic about the odds of favorable conditions with this Starlink flight, forecasting a 90% chance for favorable weather today during this 4-hour launch window with just the cumulus clouds to contend with. Again, those pops of lightning that we've been seeing in our wide camera views are well offshore and at this point do not appear to be potentially influencing the ability for SpaceX to launch its Falcon 9 rocket. But of course, we'll continue to keep an eye on that as we progress through the count, now 50 minutes and 50 seconds. Speaking of progressing through the count, let's go ahead and take a moment to talk about the countdown timeline for SpaceX and what they're going to be going through as they're preparing to launch their 500th Falcon 9 rocket to date. Everything truly kicks off with the SpaceX launch director making the call that they are good to go with the start of prop load. Generally speaking, this happens at the T-minus 38-minute mark, though SpaceX does its readiness poll electronically, meaning that it can happen a little bit earlier than the 38 point ahead of liftoff if they're in a good position to do so. Once they get the green light for prop load, that process will begin at T-minus 35 minutes with the loading of liquid oxygen on board the rocket's first stage, and RP-1, a rocket-grade propellant, will be loaded on board the first and second stages. It's a rocket-grade kerosene, I should say. T minus 30 minutes, SpaceX will load cryogenic helium on board the pressure vessels on the first stage, second stage shortly thereafter. The helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. T minus 23 minutes is when the second stage RP1 tank tops off. Then at T minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill down process begins. This is when SpaceX is thermally conditioning the feed lines at the pad ahead of loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket's second stage. We see the visual manifestation of this through the so-called big vent. Here at pad 40, that begins at about T minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds, lasting just a hair under 4 minutes in total, setting up for second stage liquid oxygen load to begin at the 16-minute mark. Moving right along at T minus 7 minutes is when SpaceX will flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps on the 9 Merlin engines at the booster stage. That'll help protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. T minus 6 minutes is when the first stage kerosene tank is full. Then at T minus 4 minutes and 30 seconds is when the strong back retract sequence gets underway. We'll see the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings open up first. Then the transporter erector, where the strong back will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket and stay in that position until liftoff. And at that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes out, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true on the second stage, about a minute afterwards, at which point the Falcon 9 rocket is really loaded, or fully loaded, with 1 million pounds of propellant. 60 seconds before launch, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. That'll happen when we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup. T minus 45 seconds is when the SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch. The engine ignition command is issued at T minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite as expected, the command will be given for the hull down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. Once again, currently targeting 2:28 a.m. Eastern, 06:28 UTC for those around the world. Or T minus 46 minutes and 46 seconds. Not every launch brings movement with it. To the Falcon 9 frequent flyers lists that we keep tabs on, but of course with the launch that we've got coming up here in just about 46 minutes, going to see that top spot notch up by one more number, be 1067 going for its 29th flight in just a little less than 46 minutes from now. The rest of the list has remained unchanged for a little while now. With a good launch on the evening of July 1st here in Florida, here's where the bar chart currently stands for SpaceX and its Falcon family of rockets. Just 14 more launches to go before SpaceX ties the total number of launches that it was able to amass in all of 2023. The company is aiming to achieve 170 launches in 2025. Across the month of June, SpaceX was able to achieve 15 launches. 12 of those were Starlink flights. Just looking back at SpaceX's month of Falcon 9 launches, among those that were not Starlinks, of course, you had the Sirius XM 10 mission, as well as the Transporter 14 rideshare and Axiom Mission 4. Time now is currently T minus 41 minutes, 15 seconds, and counting. Just a few minutes to go, generally speaking, before the SpaceX launch director will make the call on the start of prop load. I want to thank a couple folks for their support in the live chat today. I want to thank channel member and moderator Jeff Hansen, who says, "Go Cape, go SpaceX, go Falcon 9, go Starlink, Godspeed Workhorse, 1067, King of the Frequent Flyers, Aiken flight number 29. Thank you for the super chat and the good words, Jeff. Also want to thank another one of our channel members and moderators, Callistia Lee, for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Callistia. And to our 5 newest gifted members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Callistia in the live chat, and we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership. This morning's Falcon 9 mission is Starlink 10-25. Talking a little bit about the payload that's on board. 27 Starlink V2 Mini optimized satellites. This represents the 61st Starlink mission of the year so far, the 60th dedicated flight, with the Starlink 13-1 mission carrying a couple of Starshield satellites on board. These optimized versions of the V2 Mini satellites considerably lighter than their predecessors, as you can see in the satellite weight stat there. With their solar panels unfurled, they have a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. They use argon Hall effect thrusters for in-orbit maneuvering. Built up in Redmond, Washington, these will be deployed at about 172 miles or 277 kilometers in altitude at a 53-degree inclination. Here's a graphical representation of what the V2 minis look like when they're deployed in their on-orbit configuration, connected by the laser links. Now T-minus 38 minutes and counting. At this point, the SpaceX launch director should have made the call on the start of prop load, which again will begin at the T-minus 35 minute mark. Now T-minus 35 minutes and counting. At this point, assuming the go-ahead was given for the start of prop load, fueling of the Falcon 9 is now underway. Right now, we're looking for signs of fueling near the base of the first stage booster. If tanking is in fact underway as we expect it to be, we should start to see a bit of a frost line form just above the tree line, and a little bit of vapor in that part of the rocket too, as that super cold densified liquid oxygen begins flowing on board that first stage tank. Usually it takes at least 2 to 3, if not a couple more minutes, to really start to see evidence of that, depending on how sooty the booster is, the direction of the wind, how much heat distortion there is on any given launch opportunity, things like that. And we are starting to see that vapor, the telltale sign that SpaceX is in fact fueling its Falcon 9 rocket, which means they are locking into the T0 that we just mentioned of 2:28 a.m. Eastern, 0628 UTC. Time now T minus 29 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. If you're just now joining us, welcome in. You're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the Starlink 10-25 mission. A batch of 27 Starlink V2 mini optimized satellites getting ready to head up into low Earth orbit. This coming using a booster that SpaceX will fly for a record-setting 29th time. Just so happens to be also the 500th Falcon 9 rocket launch to date. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream. Lots more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Also, we are getting tantalizingly close to 370,000 subscribers, so if you yourself have not hit that subscribe button yet, Ain't no time like the present, my friends. Love to have you on board. If you turn on notifications, that way you'll never be left in the lurch when it comes to new videos that post to the YouTube channel and when we go live for these launch opportunities. Certainly was quite the light show for those watching along with us on Launchpad Live as a series of lightning strikes were popping offshore behind our cameras here at the press site. Our John Pisani happened to have the brilliant idea of setting up a time lapse to capture this stunning light show, so I want to go ahead and bring that in here. Again, this is a time lapse of the lightning over the course of a couple of hours, so quite the spectacle behind the pads here. Thankfully, with these storms well offshore and not along the path that the Falcon 9 will be flying when it does leave Space Launch Complex 40, that puts SpaceX in a good position to launch its Falcon 9 rocket in now just a hair under 27 minutes from now. Time now T minus 24 minutes, 36 seconds and counting. As SpaceX continues to add more and more Starlink satellites into its low Earth orbit constellation, it is also continuing to add more and more customers to its area of coverage around the world. In fact, just a little more than 21 minutes ago, they announced the newest country to gain access to the Starlink internet service, which is Sri Lanka. I was just about to show you the coverage map when I thankfully took a moment to double check that SpaceX had made any final adjustments, and lo and behold, they had. So here, hot off the press, is the very latest version of the Starlink availability map with Sri Lanka in that bright blue denoting that coverage is available. In the slightly darker hue of blue, you can see those are countries that are waitlisted for Starlink service. The darkest shade of blue are coming soon, and the grayed out spots are where coverage is not available, and there are no plans to make it available at this time. Time is now T minus 21 minutes, 47 seconds, and counting. In less than a minute now, SpaceX will begin the process of thermally conditioning the feed lines there at the pad ahead of the start of second stage liquid oxygen load. We'll see this visually manifest as the so-called big vent at about T minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. And there you see the start of the big vent right on time. This venting will last for just about 4 minutes in total. Time now, T minus 17 minutes, 22 seconds and counting. Got a little less than a minute remaining on this big vent here before that wraps up and SpaceX turns to second stage liquid oxygen load on its Falcon 9 rocket. With the exception of the roughly 1 hour launch delay at the beginning of the window, the timeline of the Falcon 9 rocket this morning has remained fairly constant and moving along as expected. As you can see, the big vent has tapered off, and SpaceX now turning to the start of second stage LOX load. Time now, T minus 13 minutes, 43 seconds and counting. As we are getting ready to see SpaceX launch its 500th Falcon 9 rocket launch, it's certainly appropriate to talk about the workhorse vehicle for the company. The Falcon 9 rocket, which stands at 70 meters or 229 feet in height, and has a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Majority of that is made up by the rocket's booster stage. The first stage of this Falcon 9, B-1067, has flown 28 times before, looking for flight number 29 today. At the base of the first stage are 9 Merlin engines, which burn a rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs that are used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Today, SpaceX will use the vessel called a shortfall of gravitas. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. In the image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the rocket as it comes back through the atmosphere, tail first like a big old dart heading towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are three mechanical latches that attach to the rocket's second stage, and at first stage main engine cutoff, high pressure helium is used to release those latches, and four pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Also, the second stage engine nozzle is housed safely inside the interstage adapter until the point of stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket is powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVac engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust, and it will be fired twice on today's flight to place the 27 Starlink satellites into their intended orbit. Like with the first stage, the upper stage engine burns the same propellant mix, that being RP1 and LOX. Following a good deployment of the Starlink satellites, there will be one final deorbit burn, driving the upper stage back into the atmosphere, where it's designed to burn up and help eliminate the risk of creating unnecessary space debris on this mission. Finally, at the top of the Falcon 9 stack are the payload fairings, currently encapsulating the 27 Starlink satellites. The fairings are made up of a carbon composite material and stand 13.1 meters, or 43 feet in height, and are 5.2 meters, or 17.1 feet in diameter. A little bit further downrange from where the booster lands on the drone ship, the fairing halves will also splash down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Earlier, SpaceX used the recovery vessel Doug to scoop up the fairing halves from the MTGS-1 mission. That means Bob is up next for SpaceX. Named after former NASA astronaut Bob Behnken, the other half of the Demo 2 duo. Little less than 10 minutes remaining on the clock here today. The next fueling milestone will be SpaceX flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the booster from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. That process will begin at the T-minus 7-minute mark. Before we get there, though, I want to take a moment to talk about the booster history for this particular first stage, since it's going to be making a record-setting 29th trip to space and back. We'll go ahead and speed run through its flight history as it prepares to launch once again in now just a little under 9 minutes. Its first flight was back on June 3rd of 2021 with the launch of a Cargo Dragon spacecraft on the Commercial Resupply Services 22 mission to the International Space Station. That was followed up by the launch of 4 astronauts up to the orbiting outpost Crew 3, lifting off on November 11th of that year. Communication satellite Turksat-B followed up on December 19th, and then Crew 4, the final batch of 4 astronauts flying to the International Space Station. This was the last time that a Crew Dragon heading up to the ISS for NASA's Commercial Crew Program took off without a Russian cosmonaut as one of its crew members. That was followed up by the CRS-25 mission, lifting off on July 14th of 2022. The first Starlink for this booster was Starlink 4-34 on September 19th, 2022. Then followed up by the Hotbird 13G satellite, lifting off on November 3rd of 2022 on behalf of Eutelsat. A pair of satellites for one of SpaceX's oldest customers, SES, the O3B mPOWER satellites number 1 and 2, which launched on December 16th of that year. Back to Starlinks we go for Starlink 5-2 on January 26th, 5-5 on March 24th, 5-9 on May 14th. That was followed up by the Satria satellite for Indonesian satellite telecommunications company PSN. Back to Starlinks we go with Starlink 6-10 on August 17th, 6-22 on October 13th, 6-29 on November 22nd, 6-35 on January 7th, and then we have the Telkomsat Meraputa 2 mission that launched on February 20th of last year. Back to Starlinks now. Starlink 6-45 on March 31st, 6-55 on May 3rd, 8-5 on June 5th. I have to go to a second page with all these missions that this booster has amassed. Starlink 8-3 on August 10th. Then a couple of satellites for the Galileo constellation, similar to our GPS constellation here in the United States. Galileo FM 26 and 32 launched on September 18th of 2024. Then came KoreaSat 6A on November 11th. Followed up by Starlink 6-70 on December 4th. 12-12 on January 10th. 12-8 on February 15th. 6-73 on April 14th. And most recently, Starlink 6-83 on May 13th. Just about 5 minutes to go, 5.5 minutes to go before the flight of this Falcon 9 rocket. Before we get pad level views of the vehicle from SpaceX and Mission Audio, I want to take just a quick beat and talk about where this Falcon 9 is going to fly once it leaves the pad. Talking trajectory now. The rocket launching on the Starlink 10-25 mission is going to be taking a northeasterly turn once it leaves Florida's Space Coast and Space Launch Complex 40. At the point of stage separation, the first stage booster will be targeting a touchdown on the drone ship called a shortfall of gravitas. SpaceX is working to certify both its first stage boosters as well as its payload fairings for up to 40 missions apiece.
Falcon 9 tanks are pressurizing for strong back retract.
And as you just heard and can now see, we've got our pad level views of the Falcon 9 rocket. And the company is pressurizing for the retraction of the strongback, the large support structure just behind the rocket from this camera perspective. A little bit of housekeeping here. You'll notice the clock in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, our countdown clock. A little bit ahead of
retract has started.
What's coming in from SpaceX. Reason being is our clock is in real time. The SpaceX feed coming in on a slight delay. So we'll be making our callouts based off of the real-time events while we still have tracking views of the rocket. You can see there through the vapor, the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings have opened up. And the transporter erector will soon be reclining away from the rocket. Just under 3 minutes now. Should be hearing the call out from SpaceX shortly that the Falcon 9 first stage LOX tank is full.
Stage 1 LOX load complete.
Good call there. We're now awaiting a similar call to be made regarding the second stage LOX tank. T-minus 2 minutes and counting.
Stage 2, LOX load complete.
With that call, the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the live pictures, you're seeing the ground gas closeouts. SpaceX clearing out the remaining liquid oxygen and the feed lines there at the pad.
Ground gas closeouts.
One minute and counting.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
With that call, we are now just awaiting the SpaceX launch director to give their go for launch call. It should be coming in the next few seconds.
Launch director, go for launch.
And with that go for launch confirmation, we are now just about 20 seconds away from the liftoff of this 500th Falcon 9 rocket. 15 seconds. 12 seconds. And here we go in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the 500th Falcon 9 rocket launch to date, and the booster making its record-setting 29th trip to space. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Falcon 9 a little more than a minute into flight. Coming up on max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure. Passing through max Q and throttling up. Rocket traveling faster than the speed of sound now. At this point, SpaceX will be thermally conditioning the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage prior to its first burn. We're coming up on a few events in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, referred to as MECO, at about T plus 2 minutes and 23 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation, and then the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. Payload fairings will be jettisoned just before the 3-minute mark. MECO. Stage separation. second stage engine start.
Main engine cut off.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC startup.
Should be seeing the fairing separation. There we go. See that in the big box.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And there you see those Starlink satellites released from the payload fairings and the onboard camera views. Those fairing halves will make their way down to the waters of the Atlantic Ocean, where they will be scooped up by the recovery vessel Bob, brought back through Port Canaveral onto the Hangar X site, where they will be refurbished and turned around for future missions. Now approaching 4 minutes into flight, the next milestone on this launch timeline is going to be the start of the 3-engine entry burn, which will use 3 out of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon booster to begin to dramatically
Both
slow
vehicles are on a nominal trajectory.
that part of the rocket down. And as you just heard, both the upper and lower stages following a nominal trajectory, which is certainly good news. Given the time of morning, there's a chance that we might be able to see the entry burn with our tracking cameras, but as you can see with the ascent of the Falcon 9 rocket, there are still some clouds in between us and the booster, so we'll have to wait and see if our cameras are able to capture that. If so, we will of course bring that to you, happening in about 45 seconds. That top right-hand corner box is the inner stage. Look up through that. Just about 10 seconds to the start of the entry burn in real time. Entry burn should be starting now in real time.
Both stages continue to follow a nominal trajectory.
And it looks like John's got it in the tracker.
Stage 1 entry burn startup. Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Well done, John. And a conclusion of the entry burn in real time. Still getting onboard camera views from SpaceX, though. Again, because this is coming in on a slight delay.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
With the conclusion of that entry burn, the next milestone, of course, is the start of the landing burn, which is coming up at about T plus 7 minutes and 50 seconds. So just about a minute from now, based off of the SpaceX timeline that you see there at the bottom center of your screen. The first stage landing is notably too far away from us here in Florida and too close to the horizon to be able to have a hope of capturing with our ground tracking cameras. So we'll be relying
Stage
on
1 transonic.
the SpaceX onboard cameras. SpaceX noting that the booster now transonic, traveling below the speed of sound.
Stage 1 landing burn. Stage 2 is in terminal guidance. Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
And a good and record-setting touchdown for B-1067.
MVAC shut down.
Nominal park orbit insertion.
Good call-outs there. With the shutdown of this engine on its first burn, the upper stage will now coast until T plus 54 minutes and 44 seconds. There will be a brief 1-second burn to circularize the orbit of the upper stage and allow the Starlink satellites to be deployed at about T plus 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 7 seconds post liftoff. As we are getting our launch replays ready, want to thank a few folks for their support in the live chat. Sean O'Neill with a $5 super chat who said, Connor Price, so excited. Of course, that coming in before liftoff tonight. Thank you, Sean. M.A. Ridley with a $10 super chat. Thank you, M.A. Really appreciate that support this evening or morning, however you want to think about it. Astro Joe, one of our wonderful channel members and moderators, been with us now for 36 months at the pad leader level, who says, after landing, I'm out. Busy day tomorrow. Good night, friends. Good night, Joe. Appreciate you being with us on this one, as SpaceX notched some history today. As the replays are getting nearly done, let's go ahead and take a look at our mission stats as they currently stand with a good liftoff and landing of the Falcon 9 first stage booster B-1067. That marked its record-setting 29th flight, now in the books. This was also the 500th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 83rd of the year so far. This was SpaceX's 438th Falcon booster reflight, with a launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was the company's 149th orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 263rd orbital flight from Pad 40, and the 318th overall orbital launch from this site as well. This launch now in the rearview mirror, here's where the Falcon family of rockets stands this year compared to years past. Of course, I say in the rearview mirror, obviously Starlink satellite deployment hasn't happened just yet. Still to come in just a little less than an hour from now. Moving on to some recovery stats, this was the 116th good landing on the drone ship called a Shortfall of Gravitas. That marked the 382nd good drone ship landing and the 472nd overall booster landing for SpaceX. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 58th orbital launch from Florida so far, the 88th from U.S. soil, the 98th from a U.S. rocket company, and the 146th orbital launch attempt around the globe. There have been still just 3 orbital launch failures, and here is where our pie chart now currently stands. Also want to make a quick note, not related to this launch in particular, but just in the orbital flights for folks tracking around the world coming up. The first launch of the Ares rocket from Gilmore Space down in Australia that was set for the 3rd most recently. Gilmore Space had an update yesterday evening noting that they are postponing that launch to, quote, give us a longer, more flexible launch window for our first test flight. Our new target potentially next week will depend on weather conditions and a green light from regulators, TBA. So for those of you who are eagerly watching and waiting the first orbital launch of a rocket built and flown from Australia, you're going to have to unfortunately keep waiting on that one for at least a little while longer. Got those launch replays for you ready now, starting with the perspective of John Pisani's fixed camera view here at the press site. Moving on to the wide camera view now. As we watch this, want to give a thanks to one of our channel members, Deb, for a $10 super chat, who says, love the extra camera work. Great job, Spaceflight Now. Thank you for the kind words, Deb, and for the support this evening. Moving on to the Turn Basin view. Got a nice reflection off the water this morning. Moving on to Pete Carson's Southern Tracker. Now looking at the wide tracker view from Pete. And our final view of the night, this is John's tracker from here at the press site. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wind up our live launch coverage. Really appreciate all of you who have been with us for this 500th Falcon 9 flight to date. Looking forward to welcoming you back for the next however many Falcon 9 SpaceX has before its business really turns full bore over into Starship land. I want to thank our moderators, Jeff Hansen, Aussie Space Girl, Callistia Lee, and Astro Joe, who are helping us out here in the live chat today. Thanks to our photography team of John and Michael, working hard tonight. Again, if you're not following those fellows on X, you can find them at their handles here that you see on your screen. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, has been running the technical operations of the broadcast. Big thanks to our friend P. Karstens with MaxQ Productions with tracking assistance this evening. Most of all, thanks to you for wherever you've been watching from. Certainly appreciate your time and attention and choosing us here at Spaceflight Now for your live launch coverage. Hopes and dreams. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.